Welcome to today's Post-Gazette Live. And of course, we've got lots of things that we want to jump into and talk about because, of course, the Steelers season is officially over. And, when the Steelers season is officially over, we do the same thing pretty much every single year, don't we? We talk about the same things. We talk about the same changes. We talk about Mike Tomlin. We talk about all of these other things. And guess what? They never, ever, ever seem to change now, do they? It's the same exact thing when it comes to the Steelers. And that, of course, is they didn't get far enough in the playoffs. They didn't basically do the things they used to do, which is win in the playoffs and be a team that everyone talks about and be a team that is feared. I mean, they are really legitimately just sort of a middling team right now that is, and I hate to say it this way, but they're working their way into becoming irrelevant. I mean, that to me is probably a worse place to be than anything else, is when you become irrelevant. And I'm not saying the Steelers are quite there yet. Obviously, there's still value in the brand. The NFL still wants them to be good. The NFL still next year going to schedule them for 4:00 games and primetime games and all that other good stuff. But reality is, when it comes to the NFL and the NFL playoffs and the power brokers, guess what? The Steelers have become irrelevant. I mean, next weekend is set, and guess who's not a part of it again? And here's the thing. It's not like anybody outside of Pittsburgh here is going to miss the Steelers, because this is sort of the MO. You basically look at it and say, this is what they do. They don't win in the playoffs anymore. So when you look at it that way, I think that it's really important to note that they can continue to, sort of kid themselves and do the things they continue to do over and over and over again and act like, and this is probably the thing that irritates me the most. It wouldn't irritate me so much if they just basically acknowledge that, we've sort of fallen into this place where we are, really bordering on irrelevant and all that other stuff. That wouldn't bother me so much if they just admitted it. But the idea that we're going to have to listen to Mike Tomlin over the next few days whenever he meets with the media, and then Art Rooney does his annual thing, and then at the Combine, Omar Khan will speak. And out of the three of them, Omar Khan seems to be the only one that's really realistic. But at the end of the day, they're going to continue to talk about the Steeler brand and how they're in the playoffs and, how, you could be the Falcons or you could be the Jets or you could be one of these teams. And, fans get spoiled, because no fans. And here's the thing. Okay. Let's just talk honestly. Here's honest discussion. Okay. Honest discussion is that the Steelers just haven't been that relevant of late. And in the last 45 years, the Steelers have won the Super Bowl twice, which is more than some teams, but the last one was 15 or 16 years ago. We're going on a whole generation of fans that aren't spoiled, because the bottom line is they haven't seen, the kind of success. I mean, if you think about it, from the time that I was born until the time that I was 38 years old, I saw 6 Super Bowls. I'm 54 years old now. I haven't seen another one since. And I think that, it's important to understand that they can continue to kid themselves into thinking that, the Steeler brand and the Steeler, way is working and all this stuff. It's not. Now, I'm going to tell you this much right now. This is the thing, the Mike Tomlin discussion is boring to me. It is so boring to me because it's the same thing over and over and over again. We know what his record is. We know, what has gone on the last 8 years. We know he hasn't, he's 3-10 we know all that stuff. We also know that he's not going to get fired. We also know, through, I guess it was Jay Glazer, that he's not going to step down. So to have a discussion about Mike Tomlin now is silly. It's a waste of time. The better discussion is, what do the Steelers have to do in order to figure out how to get back to winning with Mike Tomlin in place? I mean, fundamentally, Mike Tomlin's probably a better coach than a lot of guys out there. So if you keep him in place, that's fine. But what the Steelers have to understand is the landscape of the AFC and what it is going to look like. Because with or without Mike Tomlin, they better have some major changes coming down the pike, or they're not going to be a part of the AFC discussion for a few more years. And as I wrote in today's Post-Gazette, let's start with the obvious. Mahomes, Jackson, and Allen. Those three quarterbacks, still relatively young, still in their prime. They all have 3, 4, and 5 more years where they're still going to be playing at a really high level. So you have to deal with those three no matter what. Okay? I know that the Bengals didn't play very well at the first month of the season, but they figured it out. And had they figured it out 1 week earlier, they might still be playing. But at the end of the day, they still have Joe Burrow. They still have a team that, and this is where I differ from some people. I don't think there's any difference between the Bengals and the Steelers this year. I mean, the Bengals were 9-8 or whatever, and the Steelers were 10-7. The Steelers basically, inched their way into the playoffs and then got smoked. Is that really that much different than the Bengals in terms of how far away you are from the top? Probably not. My point is, the Bengals are a team that they're going to have to deal with every year. The Chargers, right? I don't even think the Chargers are very good, but they hired a new coach. They went from a 4 or 5 win team or whatever they were last year to a team that won 11 games this year with an awful offensive line, with no real weapons on offense, with a defense that had some holes. And guess what? This is year 1, and they went from 4 or 5 wins to 11. I'm pretty sure that they're going to. Jim Harbaugh will rebuild that roster, and they'll be even better next year. They still have a reasonably good quarterback. Is he elite? Is he great? No, but he's not bad. And if you put the right pieces around him, you can win with Justin Herbert. He's not Mahomes now. He's not Jackson. He's not Allen, but he's still a pretty good, reasonably good quarterback if you put the right pieces around him and he's coached right, which he was this year. The Broncos, they've got a rookie quarterback now. And guess what? The Broncos made the playoffs this year with $91 million of dead cap space. You think they're not going to improve over the course of the offseason? There's going to be teams even like the Patriots, who went from a complete, guy who had really no idea how to be a head coach to one of the better head coaches that you could probably have hired. They got a young quarterback in place. I'm assuming they're going to have a pretty good offseason in terms of what they do to build their roster. Jacksonville obviously was a disaster, but you know what? The right coach comes in, changes that culture a little bit, adds a couple of pieces around, Trevor Lawrence. That team could be reasonably dangerous. My point is, I'm looking at all these teams in the NFL, and I'm telling you, every one of them in the AFC, that the Steelers would have to compete with or whatever, the prospects for their future are better than the Steelers because the Steelers are stuck in the worst place you can be, which is sort of neutral, which is sort of just in a place where they're not really horrible, but they're not really great either. And so whether or not Mike Tomlin comes back, they've got a larger problem. Again, I'm resigned to the fact that Mike Tomlin comes back, wonderful. But they've got a larger problem, the Steelers, and this is their larger problem. They've got a flawed roster, and they're floating in a place in the AFC where I don't think it's going to be very, very easy for them to catch up to some of these teams that they're chasing. Because, again, some of them have huge, advantages already at quarterback, and that's we talk about basically, Josh Allen and, of course, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. But I'll tell you, there's other, guys, again, Joe Burrow, really, really good. So I guess, my point is that you have to do a whole lot of different things to make this team better. And it's going to start with, and I was just talking to one of my friends about this. It's going to start with this. they've got to develop a dynamic mindset. Okay? You're not winning games anymore the way that they were won in the 1970s. This, we're going to play Steeler football and we're going to run the ball and be tough and we're going to have tough guys up on the offensive line and we're going to beat you up. Nobody's playing that way that's winning anymore. They're just not. Okay? The other part of it is it's really wonderful that that's how you want to play, but you know what? You're not beating Patrick Mahomes and those guys playing that way. So they need to develop a dynamic mindset, which means that Mike Tomlin needs to take a look around the NFL and understand that his archaic, conservative, run first, defensive first mindset has got to change. I mean, because again, I'm okay if you're going to bring Mike Tomlin back, but his mindset's got to change. And the philosophy's got to change. And I'll tell you, this weekend I was sick. I was really not feeling good at all. And I spent most of the weekend in bed. On the couch, but basically that's the same thing. And I watched these playoff games. And the one that struck me was the Commanders. Okay. Now this Jayden Daniels is a really dynamic athlete. He's got a lot of really good qualities in terms of he's quick, he's fast, he's big and kind of, he's hard to bring down at times. He's, slippery when he runs. I mean, he's a guy that really has a lot of talent and a lot of ability. And what the Commanders did is they basically decided that they were going to build their offense around his talents, not try and form, him into their offense, but build their offense around what he does well. And I'm going to tell you, he doesn't have this dynamic arm. I mean, he throws it. I mean, he's got a good arm. But it's not like he's a guy that can, that's going to stand back there and pick you apart with accuracy and all that other stuff. That's not his game. He looks to me like a really young Lamar Jackson type player or something like that. Well, here's my point. As I'm watching the Commanders play, and this young quarterback who's exciting and dynamic, I'm thinking to myself, the Steelers have that guy in Justin Fields. He's useless in their offense as it is current. But if they were to get rid of Arthur Smith or tell Arthur Smith, listen, develop an offense that is going to be dynamic around this guy's talents. Read option plays, read option throws, you know what I mean? Quarterback design runs, all the stuff that Justin Fields does well, right? They might have a chance to watch Justin Fields grow up and build as a passer. Because that's all Washington's doing. I mean, that kid is going to be better next year as a passer. They'll give him a little bit more in the passing game. But you know what? He's dynamic because of the way they run their offense. They let him make plays. And so I think it's just I'm looking at it this. If I'm the Steelers, right? If you bring back Russell Wilson, you're basically saying we're going to do the same things we've done all the time of the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah, he throws a nice pass. He's a good quarterback from the standpoint of he still throws a pretty good pass. But we see there's a ceiling with him. And one of the ceilings with him that we've noticed, there's very little intermediate game with him. And so, he throws it down the field as well as probably anybody in the league. But guess what? Teams put a lid on the defense and say, beat us incrementally down the field. He's not able to do that anymore. And he's going to be 1 year older. So to me, if I'm the Steelers, I see what you can get Justin Fields for. 3 years. Tell him, listen, make it a prove it deal. Because he's still relatively young. Really young, actually. And then build your offense around what he does well. That's what I would do. Build your offense the same way the Commanders have built their offense around the talents of that young kid. And see what happens if he can develop and grow and get better as a passer. Now, what they asked him to do this year, he obviously had a little bit of success. By the same token, they didn't really take advantage of his abilities. And so to me, I think that's a better route and a quicker route for the Steelers to get better. Now, that's just part of the part of the equation to me. They've got to solve the quarterback spot. I signed Justin Fields. Maybe go out and either draft one or get another. And I don't know what the draft looks like. It doesn't excite me from what I've first glance. But go out and sign another guy and have a competition, or commit to we're going to make our offensive. We're going to build it around Justin Fields, and then go out and hire an offensive coordinator that knows how to use a player like that. I think one of the things that is always important is, do you have a guy that understands how to use that kind of guy and how to, bring him along and build him, into a good passer and all the other stuff to the point where, and I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson, but if you look at Lamar Jackson now, he's a much better player than he was. Josh Allen's another one, and when he first started, he was a guy they basically just ran quarterback runs for and let him throw the ball down the field. Now he's a really good quarterback. But you got to commit to that, and you got to commit to winning that way. The second part of that equation, though, and this is probably going to be a little bit controversial, but I don't care. It's time to blow up this defense. It's expensive, but it isn't good. There's a difference between being good and being expensive. And the first name you trade is Minkah Fitzpatrick. And at the end of the day, he's a luxury item in some ways because he's a safety that makes a ton of money, that doesn't make a ton of plays. Hopefully, someone you can bamboozle into making a trade, you move on from him, free up that money. I wouldn't even be opposed to moving on from T.J. Watt, because to me, T.J. Watt is a guy who's a great player, but because of the way he plays, the violence with which he plays, his style, his body type, all of this stuff, and I said this 5 or 6 years ago, he's the kind of player that gets worn down as the season goes on and generally gets beat up. And guess what? He hasn't been particularly relevant in the playoffs. He just hasn't. And mostly because he hasn't really been healthy. He's beat up. To me, he's still got value. I would look into trying to get some draft picks for both Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt and basically see what you can do with the money that you free up, because you need to go out and get a corner and a receiver. Those are the two areas you need to spend money on. I mean, there's no question about it. Their corners, okay, Joey Porter Jr. is fine. They don't have anybody else. Dante Jackson is a pedestrian as they come. Corey Trice, Beanie Bishop, these guys are all basically just ham and eggers. I mean, it was basically the Steelers were they basically decided they were going to try and have the overachiever award won by somebody in their secondary. That's what they were trying to do. And obviously it didn't work. You can't win with spare parts in your at corner. You can't. And at receiver, I think looking as a whole, right? George Pickens, we'll talk about him in a second, but beyond George Pickens, you have a bunch of guys that just aren't good enough. The one guy that looked like maybe he was developing into some semblance of a complimentary type player is Calvin Austin III. I thought he showed this year that he can become a reasonably good, complimentary third, fourth type receiver, but he's not a second receiver either. So to me, you've got to free up some money, but also sort of make some changes. What's going on defense is it's not been good enough. I would even try and trade, or actually, I think they have an out clause in his contract. Patrick Queen. I don't know that you're getting bang for your buck there. Take the money that you save on those three guys, and again, Landon Roberts. I think you had him for like $3 million or $4 million. See if you'll sign him for the same price, $3.5, $4 million. There you have it. As opposed to what you're paying Patrick Queen. To me, I look at it and I say that you have to, in this offseason, be dynamic in everything you do. And it is something when you look at where all of their money is spent. And you wonder why their offense struggles. To me, you've got Dan Moore Jr., right? You got to make a decision about him. Why did you draft Broderick Jones and Troy Fontenot? But by the same token, Dan Moore has been better than those guys, probably. Troy obviously has been hurt. But my point is, I think the offensive line has been okay. I don't think it's been great, but I don't think it's been horrible either. And they've invested a lot of capital into the offensive line between, Zach Frazier, Troy Fontenot, Broderick Jones. They've and Troy and Isaac Ciamalo is one of the highest paid players on the league. They've invested a lot in their offensive line. They haven't invested a lot in their offense, though. To me, I just think it is more important for this offseason for the Steelers to understand that what they're doing is not working. You can bring back Mike Tomlin if you want, and obviously they're going to. I don't think that's going to be the make or break. But Mike Tomlin has to return with a completely different philosophy than what he's had over the last 7 or 8 years. Because what he's had, run the ball, be conservative, try and be a physical team, punt the ball, play mistake-free football, all that crap, that's probably good enough to get you to 9-8 every year. There's a lot of organizations like the Jets that probably they could learn a lot from that. Because playing that way many weeks, you're just going to win because the other team's going to beat themselves. And the Steelers win a lot of games because they play smart, sound, fundamental football. But guess what? When you get to the playoffs, you better be dynamic and be able to make plays. Period. At multiple levels. And I think that's part of the issue that I have with what they're going to do next year. It's going to be much of the same that we've seen. So, I think that if you look at the Steelers from a, 30,000 feet angle and you say, what ails them? I don't know that it's Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin is a symptom of what ails them. This organization is so in love with this, a romantic idea of stability that they can't see. They can't see the big picture, which is this whole thing about being stable and bragging about having 3 coaches since 1969 and trying to do things the way that Dan Rooney did them back in the day and Chuck Noll did them. That stuff, it's not winning in today's NFL anymore. It's not what today's NFL is about. It's what you have to do to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And the Joneses, in this case, are the teams that are winning, are at the top. And, here's another team I forgot about. How about Houston? They've got a really good young quarterback, second-year coach, right? They're building something down there. They're young. They had a bunch of injuries this year. And guess what? They've managed to win a wild card game the last 2 years. And so that's another team you're going to have to worry about and another roster you're going to have to worry about. All I'm saying is this thing that the Steelers are doing, it's got to change. And if it doesn't, it's not even about, to me, it's not about the coach anymore. It's got to change. And so I think that when you look at this season to me was a total waste of a year. It was a waste of a year because, you were able to, fundamental your way into the playoffs. But it was fool's gold all along. But ask yourself this. Okay, even if you're the, most diehard Steeler fan out there, and there are some who, just hate any criticism of your team. Ask yourself this. Did the Steelers this year take any strides towards the top of the AFC? That's the question you need to ask yourself. Did they take any strides in any area to get better? The answer is no. And like I said, when it comes to, for instance, Justin Fields, they had a chance this year to use this year to figure out what they have in Justin Fields, to figure out if they can't put an offense around him. I mean, who knows? As they were building on what he was doing going through the early part of the season, You know, who knows that by maybe week 12, 13, 14, they'd have that thing rolling with him. And then they'd be ready to go and compete with the best teams in the league. I'm not saying it would have happened, but you didn't even give it a chance to happen. And now you've got to sign it. Now you've got to sign him, right? In order to make that happen, he can go be a free agent, go anywhere he wants. Did their defense get any better this year? Did they take any strides towards fixing some of the issues they've had in recent years? No. It's the same exact defense that it's been. They've got some, big name stars who are getting up there in age, and they have some flaws. Did the offense take any strides as a whole? No. They scored a few more points than they did last year, but part of that is just because, Russell Wilson was a little bit better than the quarterbacks they had last year. But at the end of the day, this was a waste of a year. That's what you should be upset about. This was a year where the Steelers, I look ahead and I say, I don't think the Steelers got any closer to where they want to be at all. That's just what it is. That's just what it is. It's just important to note that. So I don't know. I feel like it's important, when you look at what's going on with this team, the most disappointing thing about this team is that they didn't get any better. They didn't get any closer to where they want to be. They didn't really take any strides in any area. They just didn't. And so, again, I look at it from that standpoint and I say, okay, I understand what you did. You took a shot with Russell Wilson to see maybe if you can get some magic in a bottle. You obviously didn't have it. He was okay. I get a kick out of, reading things like the odds are that Aaron Rodgers' top landing place would be here. Please, we don't need that here. We don't. But again, if you ask me, every season needs to be one of two things. It needs to be a season where you really take strides towards the top of the AFC, or where you have guys get better in areas they need to get better so that you can continue to build to start taking strides towards the AFC. I don't know that the Steelers did any of that. The one bright spot, I guess, was, Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier obviously showed that those two positions are probably in good hands for the next 10 years. That's probably, to me, the extent of what I would say was good about this year in terms of, learning about down the road. I guess Peyton Wilson was good too in terms of growing. But other than that, I think they proved this year that there's so much more worried about. There's so much more worried about stability than anything else. And that's to me, a problem. They wanted Russell Wilson because they knew if they had a quarterback like him, they might have an opportunity to slop their way to 9 or 10 wins, right? And get to the playoffs again, and then they can say in the non-losing season stuff and all that other crap. As I've said, it really doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me if they bring back Mike Tomlin or not. The biggest thing they have to do is, are they going to change their organizational philosophies? That's what I need to know. Because if they don't, then what are we talking about? We're kidding ourselves. We're absolutely kidding ourselves. By the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's, the home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's and enjoy yourself. Every day, they've got all the games on. Clearly, they will have all the NFL games on all the way through the Super Bowl. So get down to Archie's for the best wings in Pittsburgh. And also, when you get there, tell Archie I said hello. There's a good comment right here. And by the way, you can leave comments, and I can react to them and things of the such. Somebody said there is nothing that can make Mike Tomlin change. Well, if you're saying that, what you're telling me then is there's no reason to even have this conversation, because it's going to be the same old next year. I'm at least trying to be optimistic. We've had a number of videos today from guys who basically have said, they got to move on from Tomlin or whatever. Again, it's a boring conversation. I'm at least trying to be a little bit optimistic. And in being a little bit optimistic, all I'm saying is, they can actually come out of this with Mike Tomlin still at the top, provided that they are willing to make some changes in their philosophy and things that they're doing. So to me, I think Mike Tomlin is a smart guy. I think his legacy means everything to him. I think he knows he's probably at a point now where he's starting to probably tarnish his legacy a little bit. And so as a result of that, I don't think he's going to be, closed-minded. What I don't want to see, however, here's the move that I think we're going to see, which would be stupid. People keep talking about firing Terrell Austin. Terrell Austin is a good coach, but he's running Mike Tomlin's defense. Who do you think's making most of the defensive calls? Who do you think's running and organizing the defense? To me, you move on from Terrell Austin. Okay, good. He'll go get another job somewhere else. You'll bring in somebody else that's just going to run Mike Tomlin's defense. It doesn't really make, you want to tell me they're going to move on from Arthur Smith? Okay, I'll listen to that. Provided they go out and get a younger, dynamic, a guy that understands how to use a quarterback like Justin Fields or whatever, somebody with those kind of talents. That's what you're looking to do, if you ask me. Go get a guy who's going to change the overall philosophy, the way they play offense, and their thoughts about offense, and their thoughts about the way that the offense is supposed to complement the defense. I've always said this: the offense complements the defense by scoring. That's how you complement the defense. So all I'm going to tell you is, if you're of the mindset that Mike Tomlin won't change, well, then, yeah, it's going to be a long offseason for you. But let's be open-minded. Let's try and be open-minded and a little optimistic, and let's see if we can figure out what's happening with Mike Tomlin and behind the scenes. Now, I think we'll hear from him this week. Usually this week he has his end-of-the-year press conference, and we can start to build on whatever the moves that are going to be made to change. But again, in my mind, they've got to shed themselves of some of those contracts on defense, spend some of the money in areas that you need to spend money, which is receiver and corner, and go from there. We'll be here every day at 5, breaking it all down. We've got lots to get to, a lot of different things to discuss. So just tune in tomorrow, and when you do, we will continue to break it down as much as we can because, well, unfortunately, it's another season where it ended way too soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.